Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to the special program about 9/11. And with me in the studio to discuss this is Dr. Max Malik. It's also time for viewers to be able to participate in the program as well. So you should see a number on your screen going through at the moment. Please, you're welcome to phone in to ask your questions or comments. Let us resume our discussion where we left off, really, on a very important point. You mentioned Salahuddin, and we mentioned Crusades earlier. And, Samuel Huntington, we spoke about earlier, he referred to this historical conflict going back, over 1,000 years, really. And some people might say, well, isn't that a bit too much in the past, as it were? How relevant is that? It might be a legitimate question.
Well, I'm sure the people of Iraq and Palestine and all the other places that have been at war would wish that it were a question of the past. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that it's not a question of the past. It's highly relevant to today. This book about the Crusades and the clash of civilizations, if you make it an inevitable war, then it's my point is it becomes one. If you see civilization as two independently developing organisms, there's one civilization which is the West, so-called. There's one civilization which is Islam, so-called, and it comes together and it clashes somewhere in Spain or France or Vienna, and you have Poitiers, the Battle of Poitiers, and you have Martel, stopping there, and you have Jan Sobieski in Vienna stopping the enraged, mad Muslims from invading Europe. Well, then it is a clash of civilizations if you look at it that way. But actually, if you're really honest and truthful, and if you go back to the beginning and you look at civilization and what civilization means, and that's a history, a culture, a language, art, literature, architecture, science, economy, and so many other things that have come together to form a civilization, then really, truthfully and honestly, there is only one civilization. And that's the civilization of humanity. And actually Islam and the West and so on, and everything from the great thinkers of time up till now, French, German, Italian, Arab, Moorish, and so on, Russian, American, and so on, are all part of the same continuum. This is my very firmly held belief.
I mean, it's an interesting depiction, actually, that you see all of that as one. I mean, a lot of people would have difficulty with that.
Well, the reason...
Yes, because there have been different civilizations, there have been conflicts. Whether they necessarily had to be a conflict is a slightly different point, isn't it?
I think you're right. There didn't have to be a conflict. There does not have to be a conflict. There do not have to be wars. History is tantamount and testament to that fact that we have lived together in peace, whichever religion or culture we may belong to. And this is where I would agree with you, but slightly take issue with the point of different civilizations. I think civilization at a humanitarian and basic level is one thing. We all want and aspire to the same dreams, hopes, and we want to build a very similar society. Tony Blair only very recently said that these people, meaning the Muslims or the extremists as he calls them, want something very different from us. Well, I would say, do they? I would say they want peace, security, everybody. I don't mean the people who are carrying out atrocities. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking people across the Muslim world.
The populace, yeah.
The populace, general people, everywhere in the world, whatever religion they belong to, want the same thing. They want peace, they want a chance to earn a living, they want education, they want healthcare, they want a chance to, do what they want in relative safety and freedom. And that is true of all humanity. And actually, even if you look at it historically, going back over time, there was the Dark Ages, so-called, in Europe. Spain became a garden of enlightenment.
Yeah. We'll discuss this. We've got a caller on there.
Right.
I'd like to take the caller at this stage.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, caller.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Is it Tahir Alam Sahab?
Your name, please, and then your comment or question.
I'm Dr. Jafar Qureshi. I'm wishing to make a comment to the illustrious writer and Tahir Alam.
Okay. What's your comment?
Dr. Jafar Qureshi here.
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment about the forthcoming book, Butterfly Hunter.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Tahir, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Dr. Jafar Qureshi here.
Welcome.
It's a great pleasure talking to you, one illustrious writer and one illustrious educationist.
Okay.
My comment I am looking forward to the book being published. Max,
Yes,
you have my best wishes at all times.
thank you, Dr.
As someone
Qureshi.
who has monitored your progress as a writer of high repute, I'm very heartened to know the book will be, inshallah, in print shortly.
Thank you.
I have spoken to Professor Akbar Ahmad, who is author of many books, an important social anthropologist, and he has coined the term Andalusia syndrome.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments and some encouraging words for you there, really.
Yes, thank you to
But
Dr. Qureshi.
so let us continue with the point that you were making, really.
What I was trying to say was that Spain became a hub, really, and we think of the Renaissance in Europe as coming from France and Italy and later on Britain and other places. But really, the Renaissance came as a result of Muslim learning in Spain. And also a model of toleration and peace, and how the three religions, three Abrahamic faiths in particular, coexisted, so much so that Cordoba was known as the city of three faiths. No one is saying that this was perfect. No one was saying that there were no problems, but one small example of how the Muslims actually provided peace and security. And this would apply to, I would apply this to any power who is dominant in the world at the moment. And the same criteria would therefore apply to America, that can you keep your minorities safe and can you protect them in the same way that the people of Al-Andalus, the rulers of Andalusia, when the Jews were being, or the Christians of different sects were being persecuted from the north, they in the Reconquista, when the Christians were reconquering Spain slowly, they ran away from the north of Spain and sought refuge in the south of Spain with the Moorish kings, with the Muslim kings and the Muslim rulers of Cordoba, Granada, and so on. And the Muslims afforded them protection and protected them from being persecuted, you know, whether they were Christians or Jews. This was a tolerant, pluralistic society. Nothing was perfect, nothing ever is, you know, but it was far, far better than hatred and distrust and bombing.
Yeah. Does this feature in your book is what I'm interested
Absolutely,
to know.
it features very strongly, and I don't know if you have it, but the poem that forms a part of the book is called Shame of Al-Andalus, and it's part of the poem, and it's been recorded by a famous Pakistani actor called Zia Muhyiddin, and I've been told that we can play at some point during the program tonight. But it's about Spain, and it's about it's full of pathos, longing. It's a vision of paradise lost, really, in a way, for the person who recites it in the book. Now, and this is a very interesting point, because talking about the clash of civilizations, this poem really is the nub of it all, because the same poem can be used to show what a great achievement a civilization can be. For example, in my opinion, some parts of Andalusia at some time in history was a great civilization. But equally, as one of the characters uses in the novel, the same poem can be used to radicalize young kids or people. Now, it's the same poem. There's no difference. The poem is an aspirational poem to aspire to achieve great art and literature and learning and peace and intolerance. And at the same time, if you look at it slightly differently or recite it differently, it can be used as a manual to terrorism. And now that's what people have said about my book. Some extremists, right-wing extremists, have said it's a manual for terrorism. Some crazy extremist so-called Muslims have said that it's actually against Muslims. So the fact that both sides of the extremists are not liking my book is quite heartening to me, because it means I've hit the middle ground somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the controversy normally is around the idea that, you know, you got these characters who actually are trying to destroy the West, aren't they, in your book, and they've got, you know, nukes of some description, and
dirty nuclear weapons.
Dirty nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And they want to use them. Could you say a bit more about that? And I can see, you can see why that's controversial, surely, can't you, really? From a Muslim point of view, or even from a non-Muslim point of view, they might think that you are kind of sensationalizing the whole idea, or perhaps legitimizing the idea for some.
I mean, as a writer, as a novelist, all you can really do, I think, is ask a question. And really, as a writer, in this novel, I'm asking, what if? And I know it's horrific to contemplate, and it is for me if I think about it literally, but 12 bombs, nuclear dirty devices in 12 of the West's greatest cities, including London and Paris and so on, is a horrific thought set off to go off together.
It's a pretty horrific thought, isn't it, really?
It's absolutely
We will
horrific.
continue this discussion. We've got a caller, and I'd like to take the call as well at this moment in time. Assalamu alaikum, caller. Your name and your question or comment, please.
Yeah, I want to give you a comment.
Yeah, please, welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Amr speaking. And you said your book is pro-Islamic. It's anti-Islamic, yeah? Your book got censored in 2007 because it's anti-Islamic. You're disgrace against Islam. That's what I can say to you. You're disgrace against Islam.
No, it's not anti-Islamic. It's not anti-Islamic at all.
Well, some people, the comment was that some people have said that, and you're responding to that. So some people have said that, and that's obviously something that you don't agree with. So what would you say? So the caller is saying that, is that the case?
Well, I would say it's not. There are good Muslims, bad Muslims, good non-Muslims, bad non-Muslims, just like real life. I mean, that's the point. We have to wake up and realize that there are good and bad in every religion, every country, every culture has its good and bad points. And that's what I would say to anybody who thinks that's anti-Islamic. We have to live in the real world. And there are bad Muslims in the real world, just as there are good Muslims.
They will do things that they should not do in that
It's
sense,
a work of fiction. I haven't personalized it to anyone. There are no individuals that that you can identify in that way. It's a work of fiction. But the fact of the matter is there are bad Muslims who do bad things. And we as Muslims have to accept that. That's the interior dialogue that I think we must have. I mean, if we just want to, as an ambassador from Pakistan once said to me, who shall remain nameless, not the current one, and so it's a long time ago, said to me, it was to another country actually, it wasn't even ambassador to England, but he said to me that, why are you shining the light on the dirt and showing the dirt up in your own house? Meaning that showing Muslims or Pakistanis or whoever to be a negative or bombers or potential, whoever, corrupt or bad characters. Well, the fact of the matter is that if everybody knows it to be the case, it's only by shining the light, you can see the light, you can see the dirt. You're never going to sweep it up if you don't see it. If you go around in the dark with your eyes closed, you're never going to get anywhere. We're not going to address this issue. And on that very important point about this war of terror, it's a very grave misconception for America or American foreign policy to think that they will solve this war on terror. They will never. They will never ever solve this war on terror.
Some people have questioned this very notion of can there be a war on terror, because war is normally against something which is tangible, which is physical, which is an entity really. I mean, terror actually is not an entity, is it?
It's a nebulous concept. It's a nebulous idea. It's a non-specific
So
idea.
can there be a war against that? I mean, we know what people generally mean by that, but it's an important point, isn't it, really?
Well, very recently, going back to Tony Blair, who was in power when 9/11 happened in this country, which is directly relevant to us, he said, or at least insinuated, and is a proponent of attacking countries like Iran, and carrying out the war on terror, as he would still, or at least he did call it, onto countries like Iran, and saying they're the greatest threat to world peace. Now, I'm not supporting a particular ideology, but he thinks the very fact that people have an ideology which is opposed to his,
it's different.
I mean, you to the very fact that you could go around advocating war like this, without diplomacy, without reconciliation, without mutual respect, I'm not a proponent for anybody. I'm not speaking on the behalf of Iranians or anybody else. All I'm saying is, as civilized, decent people of living in the West, and the West is the powerful dominant force in the world, we should not go around flexing our muscles just because we can. There has to be a bit of proportionality here. There has to be a bit of thought, pre-thought and afterthought. We've seen the consequences of Iraq. We've seen what happens when issues are left unresolved and festering like Palestine. We've seen when Afghanistan cannot be conquered. It cannot be subdued. History is testament to that fact. So why then go around advocating further violence and wars? That is terror. That is terror. Where I'm not supporting or defending anybody who carries out terror, whether that be the terrorist in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or whether that be a terrorist politician sitting in a studio in London purporting to be speaking for democracy, but actually becoming a warmonger de facto by his actions.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, we have a caller, and we take the call and resume our discussion. Assalamu alaikum, caller. Your name and your question or comment, please.
Wa alaikum assalam. My name is Usman. I live in Pakistan, and I'm basically watching your program on the internet.
Welcome.
Mashallah, it's a very good program you basically put up. Just a couple of questions and comments. One question you basically asked Max Malik was about bombing Pakistan to the Stone Age. You're with us or you're without us. What is Max Malik's political views about what the decisions President Musharraf made at the time? Were they good decisions, or if he hadn't done what he had, would Pakistan be in a state what Iraq and Afghanistan is in today? And secondly, why are people saying this book is anti-Islamic? And from what I've read on the internet, in Wikipedia and news articles of the past, the book was censored by the Muslim Writers Award. What was the reason behind that? Can he basically put any light? And as a Pakistani, I'd also like to mention, I don't like Max Malik basically saying that Pakistanis rely on their second meal or first meal by the Americans. I go out and earn my own money, and America has no influence in that. They don't provide food for me. And can you please clarify your comment, what you mean by that?
Okay, thank you very much. Some very interesting points raised there, and I want to thank the caller for that. We'll take another call, and then we'll get Max Malik to respond to those. Next caller, Assalamu alaikum. Your name and your comment or question, please. Assalamu alaikum, caller. Can you hear me? I think we don't have the caller on air. The call has dropped. So, yeah, a number of very important points, actually, which we touched upon before, but they're very important points. Let's take them one at a time. The first one is, first point that was made was about, what's your view on this, the caller is saying, was Musharraf right in capitulating to the American threats and demand? And if he had not done so, do you think that Pakistan would have been gone back to the Stone Age?
I don't think so. I don't think Pakistan would have been bombed to the Stone Age. In fact, it's very hard in practice to bomb a country like Pakistan. People often say Af-Pak and Afghanistan, Pakistan in the same breath. But Pakistan and Afghanistan are actually very different countries. There's a huge gulf between a country like Afghanistan and Pakistan. People in the West may not realize this, but Pakistan has, okay, it has problems, but it has huge resources as well. And the biggest resource that Pakistan has are its people. And the people and the culture.
What the caller is emphasizing is that it may have resulted in Pakistan being bombed as well. I mean, that's what the caller is saying, and that's what the threat was as well. I mean, so do you think that Pakistan could have, if you like, taken on America? I mean, that's the key question, isn't it, really?
Well, it depends on two things. One is self-belief and self-respect. And Pakistan overall doesn't have enough of that. And Muslims overall don't have enough of that. That's one. And when I said the next meal, I stand by that. Because Pakistan exists today and is functioning today economically and militarily because of the Americans. That's a fact. The billions of dollars that pour into Pakistan, which support its military infrastructure, you know, the fact is Pakistan cannot pay its own IMF debt were it not for this money coming from America. That's the bottom line. Now, when I said that metaphorically, next meal, I don't mean, you know, if I was working, the Americans come and feed me.
But there's a dependency, strong dependency is what you're saying.
Well, very strong dependency. We are not economically
I'd like to take a call at this stage and then resume our discussion. Assalamu alaikum, caller. Your name and your question or comment, please.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. My name is Farisa. I'm calling from England. And I want to say my opinion about 9/11.
Okay, yeah, carry on, please.
Okay. I want to say that in the American people here and also George Bush or someone like this, they are saying that this action do by Muslim people, so actually Bin Laden, or they didn't show us the black folks, yeah? That is, I can't speak English very much, but I want to share my opinion, yeah.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome, sister. We can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. When attacked does, yeah. They say that this attack is actually do by Muslim people, yeah. They say that Osama bin Laden do this.
Okay.
But they didn't have any proof. How we can accept this one? you know that Americans find the Iraq government, which is Saddam Hussein, in here.
Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't in here. He was very bad, you know.
Thank you. Yeah.
He wasn't very light, and they find him in inside the head, yeah. But they couldn't find the black books, which is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sister. You made a very important point. Without sort of going into some of the detail here, we will look at this very important question, really. And there have been many conspiracy theories, you might say, or factual theories, you might say, whatever your view might be. But this is an important point, which I'll come to in a bit. But I do want to finish the previous point before we come to this one, which was about the Pakistan actually, depending upon America. And America giving Pakistan money, and therefore they having to follow the orders and so on.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the world economy is interlinked. We're part of that economy, whether we like it or not, wherever we live. It's one global system. And we can talk about the whys and wherefores of that system, but the fact is that we live within this interlinked world, which is highly dependent upon the economies of the world, primarily the financial world, as has been defined over the last century at least, or more, by the markets of the West. That is what makes the world go round. This is actually factual. This is not my opinion. And so, as Pakistan is part of that. Now, as a relatively poor country trying to make its own way, although it's got huge amount of resources, as I say, economically, potentially as well, until such times as you discover your own integrity, self-respect, and dignity, it's no point me going around shouting to everybody in my street to give me respect if I'm not respectable. If I don't, nobody's going to respect me if I don't respect myself, and if I don't say I'm worthy of that respect. So therefore...
Some people will say Pakistan is a nuclear power, and
exactly
that ought to give themselves some self-respect and confidence.
Yeah, that's just a big trumpet that we blow, because really, it's not nuclear power that feeds the poor, or clothes the indigent, or runs hospitals, or, runs your schools, or educates your kids, or teaches your students in universities, and so on and so forth. That is just, and that, as important as the defense is, have we really staked our whole future and identity on one bomb? Is that all we are? Is that all we have? It's about time we got away from this jingoistic nonsense and started thinking like people who live in this postmodern world. And the world is no longer defined by left and right and communist and fascist. Those terms no longer apply. The world is about open societies, successful or not successful. And if you look at countries who are successful, they are primarily strong within themselves. Countries that have their own structure, they have their sovereignty, and they have a sound, or at least a functioning, economic system. Now, I love Pakistan and I love the Pakistani people, and that's why I talk the way I do, because I really want them to be part of that success story. But unfortunately, until we get away from jingoistic nonsense and flag waving on the border, and we can do this and we can do that, the fact is the way we are doing things and the way we have been doing things is actually, has been a failure and is failing. Now, I'm not talking about the whole country. There are great people within Pakistan. My heroes come from Pakistan. I identify strongly with that country, and I forever...
And there are many positive things about Pakistan as well. There are great achievements about Pakistan as well.
Huge numbers of
positive. We're making an overarching comment.
We're making an overarching comment. I'm not talking about how nice the people are, how hospitable they are, how good the biryani is. That's all wonderful. Our culture, our history, our language, our religion, our rivers, our beauty, and so on and so forth. Pakistan has huge things which could make it and should make it one of the real great countries of the Muslim world at least. And that's the crying shame. When you have all those resources, why is it not? And then we like to pretend and cast this false veil. A, we don't like to criticize the fact that some people are terrorists within that country, and B, we don't like to criticize the fact that we're failing. I wouldn't like to say we have failed. Inshallah, we will not fail. But I would say that at the moment, in this history, since 1947, we are in the process of failing. And we are in the process of becoming defunct as a power, as a state. Just having one bomb, when you haven't got integrity or social cohesiveness within your society, what's the point of having a bomb?
But the main thing is, a lot of people do point out in everyday conversation and this is a major discussion point, of course, on all sorts of television chat shows and serious current affairs programs, which is the corruption within Pakistan, the injustice within Pakistan. I think those aspects are the real things that are going to transform Pakistani society. But I want to sort of move away from that a little bit, if I may, and address the question which was raised by the caller, which I think is an important question. Documentaries such as Fahrenheit 9/11, they very much question the idea that it was the people that, that the official line says it was the Muslims that did it, really. So they don't believe the official version. In one of the surveys recently done was about a quarter of the American public, don't actually believe the official version either.
Yeah. So,
I mean, this view is quite prevalent even in the United States amongst ordinary people. And they have reasons for that. Some of the reasons relate to a system. The caller was trying to, mention some of those. But one of the main ones that they normally mention is the Building 7, collapsing. Which was not actually a building that was hit, but it went down like a demolition job.
Yeah.
So why did that building go down like a demolition job? Because of fire or whatever. So there are all sorts of theories that it was somebody else, and whatever the conspiracy theories are, do you afford any credence to that in any shape or form?
Well, it's interesting because there are lots of conspiracy theories, and I've followed them over the years, and I've seen the documentaries, and because it's an interest of mine. But I mean, and in the book, actually, the kid who becomes radicalized in the Butterfly Hunter does believe that it was Mossad. He says so. He doesn't believe it was the Muslims at all. That's obviously that's his fictional view of the world, and that's part of the conspiracy. One of the conspiracy theories, that it wasn't Muslims at all. Now, Marcus Aurelius, a Roman of a couple of millennia ago, actually said that everything you see is a perception, everything you hear is an opinion. So everything you see is a perception, everything you hear is an opinion. And that was way before 9/11. That was in the times of the Romans. So whether it was Muslims or not, it is perceived to be and believed to be Muslims. Okay. Now nobody has concrete evidence. We're not in a court of law. Osama bin Laden was never tried. He never, was found guilty in a court of law. Okay, I don't for 1 second support any kind of terrorist, least of all Osama bin Laden. But all I would say is, if you believe something to be true firmly enough, it is true for you, de facto. So the world believes that this was perpetrated by Muslims, therefore it was done by Muslims, and the effect of it is what I really am worried about. And the 10 years that has been, between the hammer and the anvil, the Muslim world has been crushed between the hammer and the anvil, and the hammer is perhaps the war on terror, and the anvil is the terrorists themselves, who are blown. Most of the people who die in terrorist atrocities across the world, within the Muslim world especially, are Muslims, as we said earlier. Who's dying in these markets in Peshawar? Who's dying in the attacks in Baghdad? It's Muslims who are dying. So that between the hammer and the anvil, we're being crushed. Innocent people are dying. That is the true aftermath of 9/11, 10 years on.
I mean, some of the aftermath, as Tony Blair said, that it will last for a generation, and some say for a century and maybe beyond, really. This episode might continue in some shape or form. But one of the things that I did want to raise was the reaction of the United States, and I was just listening to an item today, actually, in the media, where they were saying that 24 states are considering enacting laws where they are making, if you like, making it impossible for Sharia to be implemented or become law in the United States. So, we're talking about something being fact, something being believed, and there being a perception, and that perception being real to people and therefore factual. I mean, here we have people who are legislating in a country where there's only 2 or 3% Muslim population. I would like your reaction to this, really, but after the break. So we now have to go to the break, and then we will resume our discussion.